Welcome to another cheekily titled mini workshop, my clickbait title series of the reason everyone burns out. Obviously, I don't know the reason everyone burns out, but I have sort of a perspective, like all of these mini workshops I'm teaching come out of this idea of the 8 forms of capital, which I will share a picture of in a moment here. But quite simply, I think that burnout of any kind stems from trades that we can't afford. And that might not make any sense. What do I mean by trades that we can't afford? But when I show you this picture, so here is a graphic of the 8 forms of capital. Can you see that okay? Is that coming through? All right, yeah, so I could talk to you for hours about this, so I'm not going to go into everything, but just the idea that while we focus on financial capital so much in our culture, there's actually this perspective that there's 8 forms of capital, including material capital, living capital, spiritual capital, social capital, intellectual capital, so on and so forth. And anytime you say yes to something, anytime you agree to do a project, usually you're putting in multiple forms of capital. And you're also hopefully getting back multiple forms of capital. So I think of that as a trade. Like, a simple trade could be like when I get a slice of pizza, I'm trading financial capital for material capital, the material capital of a slice of pizza. That's like a very simple trade. But the more complex the project you're doing, and I know that because I know you who are on this call, I know that you do a lot of different projects, and they're complicated. Like there's a lot of social capital. You're asking for favors. You're also probably giving people favors. You're working together on a team with different people doing different things. There's money involved. Maybe like a crowdfunding is a really great example of like trading social capital for financial capital. You're basically saying, hey, everybody I know, I'm going to ask you a big favor. That's asking for social capital or using your social capital. Can I have money? But together we can create cultural capital, or we can create material capital. We can create this album, we can create this magazine, we can create this crazy invention, whatever it is. So that's what I mean by trades. Burnout often comes when, like I say, you're trading something you can't afford. So we all know about financial debt, like, if I just can't afford my car payment or something like that, or I can't afford my rent because I don't have enough money or because I'm in debt, that's something, unfortunately, we're all very familiar with some version of that. I think, and I'll just tell like a minute's worth of my story here. I mean, anybody who knows me from way back knows that I'm a musician, first and foremost, and around 10 years ago, I started having some vocal issues that made it so that it hurt to vocalize. So I couldn't even, like this much talking even would have hurt me a lot back then. I was on vocal rest a lot of the time. So this musical career that I was like going 100% in on, I had quit my day job. I was like, things were really working for me and it seemed like I had a bright future. But in retrospect, I was putting so much pressure on myself. And there were so many ways, like I quit my job so I could be a full-time musician. But I was like, okay, well, now I'm not making any money because my music is making like a trivial amount of money, so I can't afford rent. So I stopped paying rent, I moved out, and I was just like crashing on friends' couches. And that was me subsidizing with social capital the fact that I didn't have enough money to pay for rent. After a while, that got old, and I was starting to get stressed, like, oh, all these friends are gonna start feeling weird, but I also feel stressed when I like live at my parents' house because I'm like, okay, I'm supposed to be like moving out in the world. Okay, I'll just go on tour and like sleep out of the car. Anyway, I could go on and on, but you probably get the idea. I was subsidizing my lack of financial capital with ultimately my living capital, my mental health, my physical health. Every time you say, oh, I'll just rough it and not get a hotel or not sleep in a nice bed tonight, that is stress that your body's taking. And I was in my early 20s, so you think you're able to do anything. Like you think the living capital bank account is just like unlimited, and it turns out it's not. And so now I'm like this. I'm not old yet, but I feel like this old person trying to tell all the young kids, like, okay, your living capital is the most important thing. Don't you can go into living capital debt. Anyway, so like I said, I could talk a lot about that, but um, I just sort of want to propose the idea that anytime we are feeling burnout, it's because we are subsidizing some project in our life or some part of our life with a form of capital that we can't afford. And usually, in almost every situation, part of that is living capital. So the first thing I want to encourage us to do is maybe just take a moment and reflect. You can just sort of write if something popped into your head, if you're noticing like, oh yeah, this project in my life, either in the past or in the present, has put me into living capital debt. Just write a little note about it. Just think about, we're just noticing too. We're not trying to judge it. Don't, it's hard to sometimes think about stressful parts of our life or whatever, but, just notice, okay, well, this is something that maybe in retrospect I couldn't afford it. Maybe write one or two things in your life that, if anything comes up, that sort of falls into that category. And if you can't think of anything, think about a time when you felt especially burnt out or when your health was suffering. This also, it doesn't have to be like a job or a project. It could be a relationship. It could be a sense of responsibility that you have to something, pressure that you put on yourself, pressure that you feel from someone else or something else. Sort of doing a little inventory of maybe the things in our present or past that have put us closer to living capital debt. All right. So this is a list that we could continue. And so, maybe leave a little space for it. So as you keep thinking about this after this is a 15-minute mini workshop. So we don't have a lot of time to really go into it, but I want to give you some things that'll hopefully keep simmering and give you more ideas as we move forward, like through the day, through the week. Now we're going to sort of do the opposite of that and think about some places where it's like, sure, if you're subsidizing a project with living capital that you can't afford or any other kind of capital that you can't afford, that takes it out of you and can lead to burnout. But the flip side is almost everybody, when they look at the 8 forms of capital, I do longer workshops where we like do a deep inventory and kind of list all of our resources in each, section. We don't have time to fully do that today. But the cool thing is anytime anybody does, even people who come to me and feel like they're super broke and burnt out and like having a lot of trouble, usually at least one of the 8 forms of capital, they realize they're really solid in. Maybe they have a really great social support network and their social capital is super strong. Or maybe intellectual capital wise, like, they have a lot of expertise in this one field and they're just really good at this thing that they've done for ages and ages. Sometimes it is financial capital. Even if you don't have the finances, if you know somebody who does, or you can access the finances, and that goes for material capital too. Like maybe I don't have a house, but like this is actually my current situation. I have, over the last few years, I've developed this whole network of people that I've like done pet sitting for. And I don't have to own their houses to live in them for free. I have gotten to live in all these different houses. And now I actually rent from somebody who that relationship who came out of one of those like pet sitting relationships. So it's kind of cool. So what I'm going to do is put the 8 forms of capital on the board again. And I just want you to look at it and notice if there's a place where you feel like you have a strength, where you're like not in debt, but you're really almost rich with whether it's intellectual capital, social capital. And I encourage you to sort of get really specific too. Especially think about social capital. Think about networks and communities that you're part of. If you have a following on social media, if you're really good friends with somebody who has a big following on social media, like all of these things count in your inventory. We're looking for things that either are like rare resources or, places where you feel like you just are really in the green. And also places where you have access to some form of capital. So just again, I'll sort of stop talking for about 30 seconds and just notice 1 or 2 or 3 and write them down sort of in the positive side of the page. So again, this is something I encouraged you to maybe a little later today spend a bit of time journaling on. You could spend 10 minutes on this or a half hour on this, but just to give you some examples, I wrote in material capital, I wrote Deb's house. That's my landlady. She's been very generous and let me run retreats in her beautiful home when she's like out of town. Again, an example of something that like I didn't need to own that. I didn't need to rent an Airbnb. That would have cost me hundreds and hundreds of dollars, but I just asked for a favor that she was really happy to give because she could afford it. She wasn't using it anyway. She actually wanted somebody in the house instead of leaving it empty. And then in social capital here, I did Facebook friends, Instagram followers, and then thought about a few different in-person and online communities that I'm part of. If I'm broke financially, or if I am broke in my living capital, I have to ask, am I using what I already have, right? Am I asking all of these people for help? Is there any community? It can feel a little like, ooh, but I don't want to like post on Instagram about how I need help with this. But I can guarantee you the people who don't want to help you are just going to scroll by. And the people who do want to help you are going to be like, oh my gosh, Chris needs help. That's like, I have the thing that he needs. So perfect. Or I would love to donate to his Kickstarter or whatever. And so I'm going to sort of, again, this is a very quick little mini workshop. The last main thing I want to give you are sort of 3 action areas. Basically ways that when I'm worried about being in living capital debt, when I'm noticing the red flags come out, let's hold on, write my text here. These are sort of 3 principles that I keep in my back pocket. The first one, which we've already been talking about, is use what you already have. So instead of subsidizing with something that you can't afford because you feel like you have to, or because you haven't really considered it, throwing time you don't have at it, throwing health that you don't have at it, think about, oh, who can I ask for help from? Go back to this inventory of resources that you actually do have that maybe are untapped. It sounds simple, but why try to use something you don't have? Everything has a cost, and you're always going to pay it. And a lot of times people are willing to pay a cost with their health and their well-being. And I'm like, wait, if there's a different form of capital that can cover that cost, why don't we use that instead? So that's the first one. Use what you already have. Second one there's this Bruce Lee quote. I forget exactly what it is, but he says, basically he says, hack away the inessentials. It's this idea of designing by subtraction. We're always trying to add, and Bruce Lee was like a really interesting martial artist who I think anyone who goes really deeply into martial arts becomes a philosopher of life, basically. And we sort of have this idea of like, oh, I have to buy the right tool or make the right connection or start the right project to get done what I want to get done, or really to be happy. But I've found that, hack away the inessentials. The reason it's hack away is like, it's going to hurt to cut things out of your life or to cut relationships out of your life. But look back at that first little inventory we did of the things that have stressed you out. You paid the cost for those things. And a lot of times, like I think about relationships that maybe, whether it's like a romantic relationship or a project collaboration that wasn't a good fit, sometimes you can stay in one of those for years, paying the cost of it not being a good fit and not actually accomplishing like the thing that you're trying to accomplish in life. And why? Because you're scared that cutting it out will like hurt you or hurt them, or be, there's like going to be a social capital cost. But that's an example to me of like, okay, if you're not going to pay the social capital cost of saying, listen, this isn't a good fit, let's both move on to things that are a better fit, then you're going to pay the cost with health, of constant stress, of like living in the situation that's not a good fit. So hack away the inessentials as you make that inventory of like, what's not working for me, what hasn't worked for me in the past. And now the final one, which is possibly one of my favorites, is there's this wonderful actor named Andre DeShields, who is an elder Black man who, I don't know how old he was when he won a Tony, but he's in the cast of Hadestown. And he's been working hard all his life and won a Tony. He must be in his like mid 80s or something like that. He's just this amazing, beautiful actor. And when he won his Tony, he gave 3 pieces of life advice. And one of them was, slowly is the fastest way to get where you want to be. And I find that often when I'm putting enough pressure on myself, when I am subsidizing projects or relationships with living capital that I can't afford, it's because I'm trying to rush something. I'm trying to have this idea of an outcome that I want to be there now. And so I'm like, well, I have to do this. I put pressure. Okay, well, just put more time into it. Stay up late, get up early, burn the candle at both ends. This is me 10 years later, after having put so much pressure on myself that my health broke down and I had to like completely stop my musical career. And now, like, only after all that time, I'm sort of like very slowly thinking, okay, what do I want my musical career to really look like now that I'm in my mid 30s? I'm not trying to become famous or anything anymore. I'm trying to be fulfilled and healthy and happy and have great relationships. Another one of the Andre DeShields quotes was, surround yourself with people whose eyes light up when they see you coming. And I'm like, that's quality of life, right? Like, that's what I want my life to feel like and be like. I don't need to be on a stage with 20,000 people at a festival. That might be cool, and maybe I'll get there. That's fine. But slowly is the fastest way to get where you're trying to go. So if I think about my projects and structures inventory, all the things that I'm spending my time on, and then think through those 3 principles and be like, am I moving towards this being true or away from this being true? Am I going slowly, or am I trying to speed things up artificially? Am I hacking away the essentials, or am I adding more on? Am I using what I already have effectively? Or am I like trying to subsidize with stuff that I can't afford? If you can look at what you're doing and honestly ask those 3 questions, hopefully you'll get at least one insight that will help you move 5% closer to a more balanced system. And if you make a habit of thinking of these, think about even just one of those quotes that spoke to you the most, or that you felt like, ooh, I'm not doing that, but I really wish I were. Write it on your mirror, stick it somewhere on a Post-it so that you see it regularly. And I found that guiding statements like this have been the biggest thing that have made the most difference in the last 5-6 years of me doing this creative mapping work. So I'll leave it there. Thank you so much for being here.